Wildcats. Today we're looking at journal page 15, finding complex solutions of polynomial equations. Example 1, find all zeros of p of x, including any multiplicities greater than 1. All right, so again, we need to do p divided by q, so that's plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4. Q is plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3. And then again, we need to divide, so we're going to divide everything by 1, so that's plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 4. But now we need to divide everything by 3. So that's plus or minus 1/3, plus or minus 2/3, plus or minus 4/3. All right. And we're going to go ahead and graph this to find which one of these is right off the bat as 0. So let's go ahead and graph that. So 3x squared. Oh, I'm sorry. 3x cubed minus 10x squared plus 10x minus 4. All right. Now, we see 2 is a 0. Okay. Now, we can also see that the other answers are going to be imaginary because they don't cross. Okay. So, but we're going to start with 2. And then again, we have cubed, so we're good there. So we have 3, negative 10, 10, negative 4. So x equals 2. We know that that's one of them. And so we know the remainder is going to be 0, but let's go through. So bring down to 3. 3 times 2 is 6. Negative 10 and 6 is negative 4. That's negative 8. 10 minus 8 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. The remainder is 0. Now, we did that because we want to reduce this to squared so we can factor it. Because remember, this was x cubed. This was x squared. This was x. So now this becomes 3x squared minus 4x plus 2. So we have 3x squared minus 4x plus 2 equal to 0. Now, going back to the graph, if this doesn't cross the x-axis, to find the remaining zeros, it's not going to be factorable. So this isn't factorable. So what we're going to need to use is the quadratic formula, which is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Okay, where this is a, this is b, this is c. Okay, so now we're going to plug these numbers into here. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of, whenever you square a number, it needs to be in parentheses. So negative 4 squared minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 2, divided by 2 times 3. Okay, so x equals a negative times negative is a positive. 4 plus or minus. We need to find out what's underneath the square root. So we're going to put this portion in our calculator. So let's go to Desmo. Oh, we'll leave that the graph alone. Let's open another tab and we'll go to Desmos Scientific. Okay, so we're going to do parentheses negative 4 squared minus 4 times 3 times 2. And so we get negative 8. Okay. So this is negative 8 divided by 6. Okay. So then x equals 4 divided by 6 plus or minus. Now, we want to rewrite this so we can take the square root. So we're going to write that as the square root of negative 4 times 2. Because we know we can take the square root of 4. And we know that negative 4 times 2 is 8 divided by 6. Let's simplify it. 4, 6, we can just use our scientific calculator to reduce that. 4 divided by 6 is, now you'll see that's the decimal. Okay, so that's not really going to work to reduce that. Okay, so we have to go and understand what and how 4 6 reduces. Okay, so let's come over here. 4 6 can be rewritten as 2 times 2 divided by 2 times 3. Okay, and the reason why that's important is because anything divided by itself is 1. So this becomes 1. So we can see that 4 6 reduces to be 2/3. So this is 2/3 plus or minus. Okay, now we can take the square root separately. So we can take the square root of -4 and the square root of 2. Okay, well, the square root of a negative number is imaginary. The square root of 4 is 2. So the square root of -4 is 2i. So the square root of -4 equals 2i. And then the square root of 2 is the square root of 2. Divided by 6. Okay, so the zeros are, and actually let's reduce this one more time. 2 6 coming over here. 2 6 can be rewritten as 2 times 1 divided by 2 times 3. Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so 2 6 reduces to be 1/3. So this becomes 2/3 plus or minus I square roots of 2 divided by 3. So your zeros are 2, comma, 2/3 plus I square roots of 2 divided by 3 and 2/3 minus I square roots of 2 divided by 3. All right, go ahead and finish up that example. And let's take a look at the next example. Example 2. Okay, so again, we need to find all the factors of -12. So that's plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4. 5 doesn't work, plus or minus 6, and then plus or minus 12. Those are all the numbers divided into 12. Divided by plus or minus 1, which we divide everything by 1. That's plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, plus or minus 12. Okay. Now, again, we're going to use synthetic division. We have 1, -3, 4, -12. And let's go ahead and graph this to find one of the zeros. So that's x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4x minus 12. So you can see here that we have one of the zeros, but the other zeros we see that aren't crossing, so they're going to be imaginary. So we're going to use probably the quadratic formula to find those again. But we'll start with 3. Okay. Now we know that the remainder is going to be a 0, and we know that x equals 3 is one of the zeros. Okay, so bring down to 1. 3 times 1 is 3. That becomes 0. 3 times 0 is 0. 0 is 4. 3 times 4 is 12. And there's 0. Now, remember, this was x cubed, x squared, x. So this becomes 1x squared plus 0x plus 4 equal to 0. We can ignore the 0x and just write x squared equal to 4. Oh, I'm sorry. X squared plus 4 equal to 0. Okay, now we're going to solve for x. So we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. We get x squared equals -4. We're going to take the square root of both sides. Remember, square root is plus or minus. Now, the square root of -4 is 2i. So that's plus or minus 2i. Okay, so this one actually, we didn't have to use the quadratic formula, but we have our zeros. So the zeros are 3, comma, 2i, and negative 2i. All right, go and finish up example 2. All right, example 3. Enter the polynomial function with the least degree and a leading coefficient of 1 that has the given zeros. So here we're working backwards. We're given the zeros, we want the equation. Okay, so we know that x equals 0. Now, if we're given square root of 6, we know that x equals a positive square root of 6, but we also know it equals a negative square root of 6. And then x equals 3. Okay, so now we're going to work backwards. So that's just x, which we'll just leave that one for a second. Here, we're going to subtract square root of 6 from both sides. This is x equals 0. Now this becomes x minus square root of 6 equal to 0. Here we're going to add square root of 6 to both sides. So then you have x plus square root of 6 equal to 0. And then we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. So we have x minus 3 equal to 0. So now they're all equal to 0. We now know that we can multiply them and set it equal to 0. So we have x times x minus square root of 6 times x plus square root of 6 times x minus 3 equal to 0. Now, we're going to leave the x and x minus 3 alone. We're going to FOIL this. So x, we're going to leave the x alone. So that's x. X times x is x squared. X times square root of 6 is plus x square root of 6. Now, that's negative square root of 6x. And then that's negative square root of 6 times square root of 6. So let's use our calculator here for that one. So square root of 6 times negative, and we probably want to put them in parentheses if we're multiplying. So negative square root of 6, we can see it as negative 6. Okay, so that's minus 6 times x minus 3 equal to 0. Now, we're going to rewrite this as x times x squared plus x square root of 6. I can rewrite this as minus x square root of 6 minus 6 times x minus 3 equal to 0. Now, x squared root of 6 minus x squared root of 6, that cancels. So now we're left with x times x squared minus 6 times x minus 3 equals 0. And we'll multiply everything by x in the end. So now let's FOIL this. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times negative 3 is minus 3x squared. Negative 6 times x is minus 6x. Negative 6 times negative 3 is a positive 18 equal to 0. Now our last step is we're going to multiply everything by x. So that becomes x to the 4th minus 3x cubed minus 6x squared plus 18x equals 0. So the polynomial function of the given zeros is x to the 4th minus 3x cubed minus 6x squared plus 18x. Okay, go and finish up that example. All right, let's take a look at the next example. All right, same thing. We're going to again work backwards to find the equation. Now, if we have a 3i, we know that x equals 3i, but we also know that we have x equals negative 3i. Whenever you have I, you have a positive and a negative. Then x equals 2 and x equals negative 2. And again, we're going to work backwards to get the equation. So we're going to subtract 3i from both sides. So now we have x minus 3i equal to 0. We're going to add 3i to both sides. So now we have x plus 3i equal to 0. We're going to subtract 2 from both sides. Now we have x minus 2 equal to 0. Add 2 to both sides, we get x plus 2 equal to 0. So now we have x minus 3i times x plus 3i times x minus 2 times x plus 2 equal to 0. Now, let's go ahead and FOIL these two and then FOIL these two first, okay? So, x times x is x squared. X times 3i is 3 ix. Now, negative 3i times x is minus 3ix. Negative 3 times negative 3 is minus 9. I times I is I squared. Okay? Now let's FOIL this. X times x is x squared. X times 2 is plus 2x. Negative 2 times x is minus 2x. Negative 2 times 2 is minus 4. And that equals 0. Okay? Now, 3ix and that cancels. Okay? That cancels. This cancels. So now we're left with x squared minus 9i squared. And I think, let's hope Desmos does this. I'm going to do I squared. All right. So the calculator won't do it. So I'm just going to have to explain to you what happens is I squared equals negative 1. Okay. So then that becomes negative 9 times negative 1. Okay. And then x squared minus 4 equal to 0. Negative times negative is positive, so you have x squared plus 9 times x squared minus 4 equal to 0. Now we FOIL. X squared times x squared is x to the 4th. X squared times negative 4 is minus 4x squared. 9 times x squared is plus 9x squared. 9 times negative 4 is minus 36 equal to 0. All right, now the last step is we combine here. 9x squared minus 4x squared is 5x squared. So that you have x to the 4th plus 5x squared minus 36 equal to 0. So the polynomial function with the given 0 is p of x equals x to the 4th plus 5x squared minus 36. All right, go ahead and finish up that example. All right, let's take a look at the next example. All right, last example. Okay, again, we're working backwards to find the equation. So x equals 1. X equals negative 1. Multiplicity of 3. That means x equals 3. X equals 3. X equals 3. And then 5i. That means x equals 5i. And x equals negative 5i. Okay. So now we subtract 1 from both sides. So that's x minus 1 equal to 0. Add 1 to both sides. That's x plus 1 equal to 0. Subtract 3 from both sides. That's x minus 3 equal to 0. Subtract 3 from both sides. X minus 3 equal to 0. Subtract 3 from both sides. X minus 3 equal to 0. Subtract 5i from both sides. That's x minus 5i equal to 0. Add 5i to both sides. X plus 5I equal to 0. Zoom in a little bit. All right. So now we have, and you can see kind of the paper is running out. This is really long. So I'm going to go ahead and start very far off this side. So then we have x minus 1 times x plus 1 times x minus 3 times x minus 3 times x minus 3. Right, we have 3 of them, so 1, 2, 3. And then we have x minus 5I, x plus 5I equal to 0. Oh, let me zoom out there so you can see the full. Now we're going to need a FOIL. I suggest let's FOIL this, then we'll FOIL this, and we'll just keep FOILing down until we get there. So x times x is x squared. X times 1 is plus 1x minus 1x minus 1. Now let's FOIL this. So that's x times x is x squared minus 3x minus 3x plus 9 times x minus 3. We'll do that in a few minutes. Let's go ahead and FOIL this. So then x times x is x squared. X times 5i is plus 5ix minus 5ix. And then negative 5 times negative 5 is minus 25i squared. And then equal 0, but we're running out of paper, so just imagine we have the equal 0 right there, okay? So now, these cancel. You're left with x squared minus 1 times x squared minus 6x plus 9 times x minus 3. We'll get to that in a second. X squared. Now, these cancel. Now, remember, I squared is negative 1. So that's minus 25 times negative 1. Okay? So then let's FOIL this. So then that's x squared times x squared is x to the 4th. And then that's minus 6x cubed plus 9x squared minus x squared plus 6x minus 9 times x minus 3 times, that becomes x squared plus 25. Okay. Now let's go ahead and combine terms here. So then that becomes x to the 4th minus 6x cubed. 9x squared minus is plus 8x squared plus 6x minus 9. And let's go ahead and FOIL this here. X times x is x cubed plus 25x minus 3x squared minus 75. And again, equal to 0. Okay. So now we're going to FOIL this. X to the 4th times x cubed is x to the 7th. X to the 4th times 25 is 25x to the 5th. X to the 4th times, that is minus 3x to the 6th. X to the 4th times negative 75 is minus 75x to the 4th. Negative 6x cubed